Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist and composer Kevin Sun. He is promoting his new 2018 CD called Trio. He is a 2014 graduate of Harvard and would go on to complete his studies at the New England Conservatory of Music. These days he is based out of Brooklyn, New York, but previously he lived in Boston, and he performed at venues like Wally's Jazz Café and the Beat Hotel. Over the years, he's played with Vijay Iyer, James Moody, Kenny Burrell, and so many others. And along with the music, he's an active contributor to Jazz Speaks, the official blog for the Jazz Gallery, a non-for-profit jazz cultural center in New York City. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, Kevin, hey, thanks for taking a minute out for me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So let me go ahead and dive right in here before we kind of get into your life and music and otherwise. Let me talk about the new album, Trio. Mm-hmm. It's a great listen. I was very happy to get this and to have some time with it. I want to get, from your perspective, what kind of artistic vision did you have going into this album?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the pieces collected on the album, I'd say were composed over about a year and a half. And you know, it wasn't as though I had set out to really compose music for an entire album. Really, I put together this trio with Walter Stinson, Matt Honor, really just to get together, you know, with musicians who I knew would be, you know, willing to just get together and work on some challenging music, especially music where there are a lot of interlocking parts. So you really need to, you know, play it with other people and sort of, you know, lay into it and you know, sit on the grooves or whatever for a while. You know, for instance, the first song on the album is probably the oldest song that we played together as a group, and it was just sort of an exercise, in a way, a compositional exercise. And so a lot of the pieces sort of, I guess, are united, you know, in that sense. They're, you know, they're vehicles, you know, for us to work out specific, you know, rhythmic ideas or harmonic ideas or whatever.
So who did the artwork?
My girlfriend, Diane Zoe. So she paints, clearly, and
cool.
Also does digital art.
Very nice. I dig it. Yeah, in fact, I have a component that I do with my engineer who has a show here in the Kansas City market called the Neon Beat, and I opened this on the air when we were doing a segment. I was just, the artwork jumped out at me, and it was cool.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Great. Glad you liked it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let me ask you this. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in central New Jersey. You know, like outside of Princeton, New Jersey. It's the nearest well-known town.
So let me ask you this. What kind of music did you listen to growing up, or how did you get this interest in jazz?
Yeah, it's really specific. I can remember exactly why. I basically heard Get Gilberto, that album, the famous Bossa Nova album. So I kind of stumbled upon it randomly. I didn't really listen to music before then, but basically a friend was taking a, you know, sort of enrichment weekend class on jazz history. They had like back then you'd like burn CDs and you would have mixes, you know, compilations. So one of the songs on there was Girl from Ipanema. I was just listening to it. You know, I borrowed the CD just for fun. I didn't even know what any of the tracks were. I didn't have a track listing. I was just listening kind of blindly. And then, you know, there's a great saxophone solo by Stan Getz. So I heard that solo, and then, you know, I had already been playing saxophone in concert band, you know, basically because my parents made me do it. You had to, like, pick, you know, some activity to do. But hearing that solo and just hearing, you know, a saxophone sound like that, I kind of knew that I wanted to try to do that in some way. And so that's how I started getting into jazz.
So were you nervous during your first performance on stage, or has jazz always been a natural fit for you?
Yeah, I was definitely nervous to stand up. I mean, the first time I took an improvised solo in public, sure. It was probably like 8th grade or something, you know, in a gym, you know, high school, middle school band in front of parents and students or something. Yeah, I was definitely nervous. I don't know. It's hard to say if it was a natural fit. I definitely know I just gravitated toward it. It was sort of like a compulsion. You know, once I listened, you know, I basically just got hooked. You know, I just love the sound. And then, you know, the more you do it, the more discipline and freedom you find, you know, as your study of it deepens.
You move on to Harvard. You graduate in 2014. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about your experience at Harvard that helped enrich your outlook on, you know, music and jazz and just preparing you for the world.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I studied English there. I was an English concentrator. They don't say major there for whatever reason. So, whatever, weird tradition. But yes, I studied English. I went in sort of thinking I would study economics or something, because whatever. So that was the thing to do. But basically I took one English class, that sounded interesting. It was about Vladimir Nabokov's novels. And I just, thought it was incredible. I didn't know, this format of, lecturing with all this interesting sort of formal analysis and historical context, That's something that I never had in high school, and I just, fell in love with that. So being at Harvard, honestly, I didn't have that much time to practice saxophone. I mean, I, was still taking lessons on a regular basis through the New England Conservatory and playing here and there with some people who I knew who went there. But I really spent a lot of time just reading a lot of literature and, learning a lot of different ways to read. And I think in some ways that sort of gave me a sense that there are other ways to study music outside of just learning all the scales, learning a lot of tunes, learning a lot of patterns. I started to transcribe a lot more also because I was studying with Miguel Zanon at New England Conservatory, and he sort of became my mentor and sort of changed the way I would, study music. So I transcribed a lot and just thought a lot about music as text and recording as texts and just trying to dive into the history of it all.
And then from there you move on to the New England Conservatory of Music. And what did you learn there that was instrumental to you as a player?
Oh, so much. The first thing is just being around the other students and playing sessions and just trying to, get started on the path of trying to find out who you are as a player. And the way to do that is just to play with a lot of different people who have different approaches. New England is very open-minded in that sense. So I could play with all sorts of different people who had different interests, coming at, improvised music from different angles and different, traditions. So there's that. Of course, the teachers I studied with, life-changing experiences. Studying with Miguel, I think, in addition to just working on getting inside the jazz saxophone tradition by, learning a lot of solos by the masters and trying to inhabit, their sounds. He taught me a lot about composition and just thinking about, how to compose music using the basic building blocks, of rhythm and melody, creating harmony, and sort of just formal ideas about how to design pieces that have complexity and form. And, for instance, like writing drum parts, that's something he was really specific about, was he wanted me to write out all the parts, not just write a lead sheet that didn't have, and you just hand it to the drummer and say, play whatever you want. He actually really wanted me to write specifically what the drummer should do, in the same way you tell the saxophone, like, this is the melody, play this sequence of notes, with these lengths or whatever. So I started doing that. A lot of the music on this album, is influenced by that, reflects that.
The one thing about you, too, is that you have journalism in your blood. It's definitely a part of what you do with being a part of Jazz Speaks, and you were also a part of the Harvard Crimson. Is that something I've always felt personally, being someone that's in journalism and had a history with writing, that once you get into that, is it kind of like being a musician? It gets in your bloodstream and you just have to do it?
Interesting. I feel like I do it, specifically that kind of writing, nonfiction, whatever, feature writing. I do it less and less just because I have really been focusing on music, but it's definitely an impulse. I think definitely the way I read, just news articles, whatever. And especially, I think about, I basically, one thing I use writing for is to figure out what I think about something. And when I had a great professor in college who said that, when you write, you want your sentences to be ideas that walk in a straight line. That's a bad paraphrase, but basically it's like you have all these ideas, they're going in different angles, but when you have to write, you have to put them, you have to line them up and have it make sense. And that's where a lot of, what I figure out about music, I do through writing,
How does being a writer, obviously you've had a long history of writing and you were a major at Harvard in English. How does that lend to your music brain? How does that help you express your ideas?
One of the things that I learned a lot through studying writing, both through journalism and I guess both through my experience with the Harvard Crimson and through classes, was really, you want each idea when it comes to follow the next with the the tightest logical connection, you know. Like you want links on a chain, you want every link to be strongly connected to the preceding one, and that's how you create, an essay that stands up. You basically want to write something that's airtight so that if you took out a sentence from the middle of it, it would just fall apart because of how tightly constructed, the ideas are. So in music, I try to hold myself to some sort of standard, remotely approaching that. I think you can get away with a lot more music because it is, abstract by nature. But, formally speaking, like that's how the great, composers put together great pieces, is that the development is so retrospectively justifies itself when you get to the end and there's a payoff and you see that everything that came before had to happen in that, sequence. So that's kind of what I'm going for.
So when you were in Boston, you played at Wally's Café and the Beat Hotel, and now you're living in Brooklyn. Is it always a thrill to get into these kind of hallowed institutions of jazz to play live for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every stage, sort of, especially if it's, a stage in a venue that's been around for, at least a few years, it definitely takes on sort of some significance. And so when you get on stage, you definitely feel some energy. I've heard people talk about playing at the Village Vanguard like their spirits in the room, obviously, because so many great people have played there, over 8 decades. And, like a lot of our favorite recordings are recorded there. So obviously, something like that. But even the Jazz Gallery, it's been around for over 20 years. A lot of my mentors had their start there. Miguel Zanon, Vijay Iyer, they sort of, that was, for them, the first place they played as leader in New York, and they played a lot there, in the earlier years in the city. So for me to be able to play at the Jazz Gallery, we just played there last night, and it was an amazing experience. 2 sets, of original music. I feel like I just try to hold myself up to that standard as best I can.
So you've played with Vijay Iyer, James Moody, Kenny Burrell, Dave Liebman. You've been around a lot of real... No, go ahead. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I know that's included in my bio, and I've been thinking a lot about that. Maybe changing that. I have shared the stage with them, and, we play a song or, a few songs. But I think, a lot of those things were like, I was part of a larger band or something. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
But the bottom line with that is that by either direct contact or osmosis, you've been around these players that have had a lot of years of experience. What have you learned that's helped you grow as a musician by just being around them and see how they operate?
For me, a lot of it is just musical intuition, seeing how a musician who has so many years of experience, just so many, like, probably thousands of hours on the stage performing that type of experience that you can't substitute with anything else. Just seeing how they navigate situations, because if you're on the same stage and you're in the moment with them, moving through these pieces where there are a lot of points where people have to make decisions. So when you can see and experience and respond to, how they deal with situations, either, if the music is going really well and you're wondering, where could it possibly go next? It's already really great. Or if somehow things get off, how do they respond to that? In situations where there's potentially there could be a crisis, that sort of thing. I've seen both, and, basically you see like master musicians, they pick the best, or, hard to say the best, but a solution that, leads to a positive outcome in the end, or surprising in a good way.
So let me ask you this. We learn a lot from the live shows that we see throughout our lives. Tell me what has been one of the most memorable jazz shows you've seen live that really moved you?
Oh, wow. That's such a hard question. I mean, I've seen so many shows that I feel like it'd be hard to single out any one thing. I mean, I can think of a more recent example. I saw, so last January, I saw 10 sets at the Vanguard. I saw basically every set, every night, except for one night of a run. It was Ethan Iverson, the pianist. He brought in a quartet that featured Tom Harrell, who's, a master trumpeter, sort of an elder statesman in jazz now, with, rhythm section of basically Ethan's peers, Ben Street and Eric McPherson. And, I saw Tom Harrell play sort of these standards I'd heard a million times, sort of the same standards every night. I just feel like just to see him play these songs that, in some other context, like at a jam session, you get this really disappointing, tired feeling. But somehow when he played, he wouldn't take super long solos, but just sort of he would just dive in every night and just try to make something happen. Not in a contrived way, like not by doing some sort of gimmick, but sort of he would just start playing, on I Remember You or, some other song we've heard a million times, and just commit to following the train of thought wherever it goes. And sometimes it would lead to familiar places, but sometimes, it would lead to kind of really striking new territory. So that's like something that has stuck with me.
So let's up the ante a little bit here. We could get fantastical here, and you got a jazz DeLorean sitting in front of your house, and you could climb in, punch in the digits. Where are you going? Who are you going to see?
Oh, I'd love to go see the Count Basie Orchestra in maybe like the summer of 1938 or in 39, somewhere in New York, maybe like the Savoy Ballroom or the Famous Door. I'd love to see that and see Lester Young play. That would be number one for me right now.
Yeah, Count had a lot of history here in Kansas City. I've heard that answer a lot. Yeah, so, yeah, right on.
Oh, sorry, that just reminds me. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Either that or I'd love to go, actually, because we have some recordings, I'd love to go to, like 1934, 35 and hear Lester Young playing around then, because there's so many stories, like a late night session, Mary Lou Williams or something, and a lot of players. But to see Lester Young in one of those late night jam sessions, that was never recorded.
So let me ask you this: why do you love jazz?
It's just, I love the feeling of it. It gives you a feeling of. It can be all these things, but it can, when you see really great players play, you witness sort of this great freedom in display in the context of great discipline and restraint. There's some amazing balance there that, I don't know, is really inspiring to want to take into other aspects of your life outside of music.
So let me ask you this. Everyone has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, those that you play live for. But when you wake up and you face the day, who are you? Who do you think you are?
I just try to be someone who has some sort of positive intention, going into the world and is trying to go with things and make good things happen both for myself and for others around me. I don't know. Is that maybe that's too abstract. I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
No. No, there's no wrong answer. Yeah. There's no wrong answer to that one. Yeah, for sure. Well, Kevin, I think that kind of rounds everything out as far as your life and music, talking about Trio. Hopefully we'll see you swing through Kansas City at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to one day, absolutely. And if I do, I'll definitely give you a shout.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Brooklyn, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Kevin for his time, his stories, and his music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.